Better late than never. We are here for session number 3 of day 2 of Bring Your Own Bold. Big warm welcome to you if you're joining us for the first time, or if you're back with us, if you joined some of the previous talks, welcome back along. My name is Dave Corlett. I'm the business director at the creative agency Shaped By. And if you joined our chat with Jessica Rosenberg from Jasper yesterday, we touched briefly on one of the biggest issues facing creative teams at the moment, which is how to test, how to evaluate, and how to integrate AI tools into your team's workflow. Actually, to be honest with you, there's an equally big challenge that comes before that, how to navigate what's been described to me on more than one occasion as a wild west of constant new and updated tools, and find potentially good fits for your needs before you even start the testing and evaluation process. So this session is devoted entirely to tackling all of that, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Eduardo Garcia-Lopez, to the stage today. Hey, Eduardo, how you doing?
Hey, Dave. How's it going? Thanks for inviting me. Super excited about it.
Absolute pleasure. And just to let you know, we might overrun with this session, but that's cool. We've got a sort of 15-minute gap between sessions anyway, and it's kind of designed for things like this, so we can just crack on. Now, listen, let me introduce Eduardo. So throughout his 6 years as a principal designer at HubSpot, we all know HubSpot, Eduardo has been constantly exploring new tools and new technologies, and most importantly, finding effective ways to integrate them into his team's workflow. But before we get into the bones of talking about specific tools, I'd actually love to start by getting a little bit of insight into your journey to becoming what we spoke about before this session, an AI advocate at HubSpot. How did that all come about?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that really caught my eye in terms of generative AI was Midjourney. And this was back in around November of 2022. Back then they were on their version 3 model, which, you know, the technology was quite impressive, but the imagery itself wasn't that impressive. It was, you know, blurry and it was kind of something, but still, it was really interesting. I was very amazed at how a computer could even generate that. But fast forward a couple of months, Midjourney comes out with their version 4 model. And I saw some post on Instagram that just, you know, blew my mind. And on January of 2023, I decided to just take a deep dive and see what the technology was about. So I joined Discord and just started my journey. And I would say it was not that easy. Back then, there wasn't a lot of documentation. There wasn't a lot of information out there on, you know, prompting, how to do it correctly. So I just started with Midjourney's own documentation and trying to make sense of out of this technology and this, you know, interaction with a chat field, which, you know, it's completely new. But slowly I started to get into how it worked. And what I started to do was just experiment, because I didn't know what I wanted to do with it yet, because I didn't really understand how it worked or the benefits or anything. I was just, you know, what is this? How does it really work? And what is this interesting community that's forming around Discord? So I actually started an Instagram account because I wanted to document this journey. And I started following different people. And anytime I saw somebody doing something that just blew my mind, I would just reach out to them and ask, hey, you know, how do you do this? Tell me about your prompting style, or how do you manage to get a specific texture? And it was interesting because most people were very hesitant to really give me an answer. They were like, well, you kind of do this, but I can't really tell you much more. And there was a lot of gatekeeping because it felt like, you know, if you had that knowledge, you could basically copy what they were doing. So it was a little bit, as you were saying, it's a bit of the Wild West. It's hard to understand how this really works. But as I progressed, I came up with this, you know, kind of like iterative, creative process where I would just bring in a lot of different types of inspirations, whether they'd be images, different types of prompts. And I slowly started to generate images that felt like I was telling a story, that felt like I could control. And within that, like, you know, by chance, not that I was trying, I ended up creating this library of prompts and images that after a while, after a long while, because I had generated over, I think over 6,000 images in the first 6 months.
Wow.
I had my own library, and it was really interesting because I wasn't really going to external inspiration. I kind of had all my inspiration within Midjourney. And, you know, this lasted around 8 months. And it was around, I would say, June of 2023 when this whole, AI boom just exploded. And it was AI this, AI that, and, there's a new tool here, there's a new tool there. And everybody was just going crazy. Like, how do we use this? What is it? How do we implement it within our teams? So the creative team at HubSpot actually ran a couple of pilots, one for Midjourney and then one for Runway. And we started exploring what implementing these tools with what we did day in and day out would look like. We mainly create a lot of branded content for our marketers and HubSpot at large to use. So initially we're like, AI is amazing. It's going to be this tool where it's going to help us to create all these different assets. And, we tested it. And back then, a little bit over a year ago, which is nothing but feels so distant in AI years, that, there were a lot of limitations. There was a lot of concern around brand limitations, in terms of, is it cohesive with what we currently have? Brand standards. What if there's a weird hand or something strange that we won't want any marketers to publish? So there were a lot of questions. And, those pilots were very extensive. But in the end, the answer was, let's keep it to the creative team and, let's figure out how we can really use these. So right after those pilots, I had a project which was an art direction for a photo shoot. And, I had experience with Midjourney. So like, I knew how to get really interesting results, but the idea wasn't to generate images to replace our photography. We weren't at that point yet because it was still quite obvious. But what I really wanted to do, and how I really started to incorporate AI into my workflow was, I started thinking, normally for any concepting, we have mood boards. So we bring an image, like, let's say like a space, a person, maybe something that will show a stakeholder, the lighting, maybe what the models could be wearing, the fashion and all of these things, and generally have a mood board. And what you're asking is that stakeholder to put all those images kind of like into their brains and somehow make something out of them. Like, they have to recreate what we're telling them in a collage and form an image, which is hard for anybody. And through that experimentation with Midjourney, I started giving this a try, and I said, what happens if I feed that mood board into Midjourney, adjust a few prompts, and kind of like iterate until I start getting images that I think will be what that final result is going to look like. And I just bet on that and kind of like went for it. And, I was kind of scared because I didn't know if it was going to work or not, and if I was just wasting time. But luckily it worked. And I was able to tailor images that were going to be pretty much what the results of the final images were going to be, or what we were envisioning. Midjourney at the time, which I think it's actually something that I love, because I feel like Midjourney always releases a small feature that I'm in need of at that moment. So they came out with this, new tool where you could select an area within the image and you could write another prompt and would only affect that part of the image. So for me, it was perfect because I was trying out what the characters within that image were wearing. So, it would be more in tune to what we were talking with the stakeholders. So it would be like, is it a vest? Is it a sweater? Is it a jacket? Can we put dots on the jacket? Is it a denim jacket? So it started to get very, very close to what that final image would look like. And, the process went really well. It was well received. And at the end, what we ended up having was a really clear direction on what that photo shoot was going to look like and what the final images would look like. It was almost like we were signing off on something that felt like final one step before going into production and the actual photo shoot. So that's kind of where it started, and it's kind of like paved the way ever since.
That's amazing. I mean, and just to clarify, so at the start you were kind of exploring it in your own time, and then obviously when it came to piloting it, you've got this amazing bank of experience to immediately come in with. Is that fair to say?
Exactly. I would say maybe 4 or 5 months head start, and then it just kind of like came in.
Nice. And then, so fast forward to this year's Inbound, HubSpot's famous, world famous event, your annual event. Obviously, to this point, as you mentioned, you've mainly been using Midjourney and AI tools for kind of concepting and mood boarding. But you took that a little stage further and created kind of an AI-driven project for the Inbound event. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. One more technical thing, my battery might die, so bear with me. There we go.
Cool.
Yeah, so this year's Inbound was really interesting. The production team came to us, the creative team, and their challenge was to extend Inbound's visual presence in the physical space, because there's a lot of different screens, and they had this real estate that they knew that they wanted to fill, and they came to us and said, we want to fill this with AI, like, can you guys help us? And if so, what does that look like? So this was a huge opportunity for us. It was the perfect moment to showcase what AI can do. And not only what AI can do, but what our team, or like what a creative person can do with AI. And, there was really no specific brief. There were already guidelines that had been created for Inbound for all the visuals, in terms of flyers, the website, banners, everything that's been printed for the in-person experience. So that already existed. That brand manual already existed, and there was a theme that was a city that had already been established, and there were stages that were already being built. We had all the renders, so we had a lot of information to take in, and we went and had the same approach that we would normally have if we were creating anything that had to fall into branded visuals. So the manual had a very interesting beginning. It said, these 4 shapes are the primary shapes that are the base of everything. Everything is built from these shapes. So what I did was I took all of these different shapes and I started to feed them into Midjourney. And I started adding different prompts, similar to the process I've mentioned before. I started iterating with these images and creating generations and generations in Midjourney until I was really happy with the images, the static images that I had created on Midjourney. They felt, kind of like in between what the brand was doing already and pushing the limits a little bit. And once we started ideating and we presented this to the production team, we just came to this conclusion and goal that the idea was to focus on abstract expressions of the brand because we didn't want it to feel like, you know, nobody would notice, that it was just like so close to what already existed that nobody would notice. And we didn't want to take it too far out that it made no sense. So we found that happy medium, and abstraction was the way to go. So with these abstract backgrounds that we were creating, sorry, not backgrounds, images that we were creating based of these base elements, we were able to start extending that visual language that Inbound needed for the in-person experience. And there were two other elements to this. And one was that each stage had its own design. And what the production team wanted was that these graphics didn't feel like they were too far off from the stage. They really needed to blend in with the stage design. So I did the same approach. What I did is I took screenshots of the renders and I just started feeding them into Midjourney, and I created images that were in line with the stages. And then finally, there was the city theme. And for this, I started to generate different ideas of what a city could be like in different styles. So there was a style of a city that was all like vector illustrations. There was another one that was paintbrush illustrations. There was one that was Boston made out of paper, and it was like a mini city, which that was one of my favorites. And once we had all of these images and we had them paired with the stages, with the Inbound brand, and then with that city theme, everything got approved by the production team. And then we took this into Runway and basically added animation to everything. And this is how we started creating those 30-second videos that would then be streamed on all of the screens at Inbound. And, you know, the results were really amazing. I was there to see it in person, and it really felt like we had created something that was immersive, that it was in line with the brand, but with these massive screens, it kind of took over the colors of the surroundings and just really painted a different picture than, you know, something that would be static would have achieved. And it was just really interesting. And I think we really pushed the envelope there in terms of what we had done using AI, where before, you know, we were using it mainly for concepting, but this was the end result, and it was what lived on these stages. So it was, again, really amazing to be there in person.
Yeah, I've seen some of it. It's absolutely fantastic. Really, really lovely stuff. There's something I want to come to in a little bit around kind of your not concerns, as it were, because obviously you pushed ahead and it's gone live, but just some issues around potential kind of IP and that stuff. But what I wanted to kind of focus on was something that you touched on actually throughout the whole time you were talking there, which is basically, it sounds so kind of, not easy as it were, but it sounds such a natural process for you in the way that you were talking about using Midjourney, getting used to the prompting side of things, and then putting it into Runway to animate it. It seems like you really feel like you've got a kind of process for this, you know, fast becoming nailed down. But that's not the case for a lot of creative teams out there, especially smaller creative teams that may not always have the time to kind of test and pilot these tools because, you know, the workload is so heavy. Do you have any particular advice for kind of smaller creative teams or any creative teams out there that are struggling to incorporate AI into their workflows as smoothly as you?
Yeah, I think, you know, my advice would be to just start. I think it might seem like it's a very tall mountain to climb. And it can be a little bit complex, but there's so many videos out there. There's so much more information than when I started that, to me, it's just a matter of, you know, starting. And as you progress using the tools, you'll find how you can use it. I think you almost like need to talk to it and understand how it works. And then that's when I think you get these ideas of, wait a minute, I could actually use it for this, or I'm trying to solve this problem, or I'm trying to create these images and I might be stuck. Like, AI is like an amazing tool to help you conceptualize ideas, to help you come up with new concepts. I think one of the things that I love about it, and that I think have really marked me in the work that I do with AI, is that I can blend different ideas that I might have seen out there, whether it's through a prompt or through an image prompt mixed with a text prompt mixed with something else, and you get new results. This was basically what happened with inbound. It was a lot of iteration to get to a point where you find something that feels like it's your own creation, because it's so far from inspiration, or it's so far from something that you might have seen, because AI does help you create something that's new. So I think the sooner that you begin with this process and experiment, the sooner you'll like really understand how you can leverage it and how your organization can start to implement it.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. I mean, we're trying to use AI every single day here at ShapeBuy in some way, shape, or form. It's almost like a mantra that we're trying to live by, and I think that really, really helps just embed it as part of your natural psyche and the natural way that you do things. And it's already having a massive impact, in terms of time saving, efficiencies, but also that kind of creative side as well. So yeah, AI is here, and we really, really have to embrace it 100%. I wanted to come back to that point actually about kind of that I mentioned earlier about kind of IP and some of the legalities or potential legality issues around using kind of AI generated imagery for commercial purposes. I mean, there was a question I wanted to ask you about what are the biggest misconceptions about AI in the design and creative fields. Is that one of them, given that you're using AI in a commercial sense for things like inbound?
Yeah, so this is interesting because when you have an enterprise account with Midjourney, you have basically the ability to use the imagery commercially, which it's strange that if you're paying for it you can, but if you have a free account you can't, which is strange. But I think something that for me is very important, that I've seen it because I've been in the creative world for many years, is that even without AI, people copy sometimes blatantly to the extent that it's the exact same thing. And, we run the same risk with AI. I think at that level, that is always going to happen. We live in a world where people get inspired from different places. Some people decide to take that inspiration way further, and the work they create has nothing to do with what was inspiring them in the beginning. And I see AI the same way. I could not use AI and copy somebody's work. I could use AI and copy somebody's work. For me, both are wrong as a designer and a creative. But I think the power of AI, and is what I really saw in those 8 months of experimenting, was that I was able to almost create my own style of imagery by feeding it a bunch of different things and iterating, that the end result had nothing to do with an image that I might have fed into Midjourney. You can really take it really far. Or in the instance of inbound, it helped us generate these images based on what already existed and technically was our own. So I think it's still an issue of the industry. I think sadly, AI will make people lazy, because you can say, do this in the style of whoever, and it's going to be, pretty much the style of that person. And I think that if the creators of these tools start to put either guardrails or put in systems where if something like that blatantly happens, that at least the artist gets some sort of reward or like royalty, that already exists. So I think those kinds of systems should have this if they are going to copy work so blatantly.
Yeah, I think so. And you're exactly right. And this is a point that was raised yesterday, actually. Plagiarism isn't just limited to AI, unfortunately. It is part of the world we live in. Not that we should be striving for that, but ultimately the goals, I think, and the outcomes do outweigh some of those issues for sure. And I think that's the way that creative teams should be approaching it. Listen, Eduardo, we're nearly out of time. I do have one more question that I'd really like to ask you, because obviously you are someone who's quite pioneering when it comes to adopting AI tools. You obviously keep your ear to the ground and keep your eye on the ball as far as new developments are concerned. But where do you see this going, particularly for in-house creative teams? In the near future, I should say. It's really difficult to predict even like 3-6 months down the line for AI, but where do you see this going in the near future? What's the next development from a creative point of view?
Yeah, I think that AI in the creative world, it's really at its infancy. I think we're just
right now, right?
Sorry?
It's the worst it'll ever be right now.
Yeah.
It's only gonna get better.
There's so much more stuff that's coming out, and I've been deep into the AI tools for almost 2 years now. And I think where I see the change and where I get excited is that, before it was limited to this box where you just would write a prompt and you would wait and see what happened. But a lot of tools are really starting to think what it means to have an AI powered software, meaning that I think we're going to have way more control of what we create using AI. It's not going to be so experimental and kind of let's see what happens, but it's going to be more like, I want to move the camera here. I want this to happen there. I have a library of different textures. I don't need to know the prompts or the styles of every single thing out there in my head, or have, this doc that feels archaic of definitions. But there are going to be all these libraries similar to what Adobe does, funny enough. But there's going to be libraries, there's going to be different ways of interacting with AI that are really going to empower the individuals to create stories that we haven't seen before. And I've seen some of these starting to happen. And again, let's give it 6 months and a year. And I think the control we'll have over what we're creating is going to be incredible. And as time progresses, the quality or realism that these models are achieving just keeps getting better. So I feel like, it's these two variables that are going on at the same time that at some point are going to really come together, and we're just going to have amazing tools to create amazing content, visuals, videos, and who knows what else.
Yeah, and we're well on the way to that, and I think the big message from this session to creative teams out there is embrace it, start working with it, start playing with it, make it part of your daily habit. And you can exponentially realize the potential of this amazing technology. Right, listen, Eduardo, thank you so much. We got there in the end after a few technical hiccups, but you've been a really great guest. There was some super insight in there. Thank you so much. And if you're sticking with us for BYOB, join us in a little bit over 5 minutes for our next session on getting the most out of your creative agency. Bye for now.
Thanks, Dave. Bye, everyone.